Thank you so much for joining me today, John. I appreciate it. Can you just introduce yourself to the Informs members?
Sure. So, John Owen. I work at General Motors, and I lead the Advanced Analytics Center of Expertise inside Enterprise Data Analytics and Insights organization.
Okay. And how long have you been an Informs member?
Let's just say it's north of 25 years.
All right.
Let me leave it at that.
We're happy to have you. So tell us what initially attracted you to OR and MS and when you discovered Informs as well.
Oh. So ORMS was interesting because I was thinking back to this. I have 2 kids now. One's getting ready to go to college. And you always ask, what do you want to do? I had no idea what I wanted to do. And I was going to University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill. And at the time, they gave you a freshman advisor. And my math, quantitative, top. Verbal, not so much. She asked what I liked. I told her, and she said, well, have you ever heard about operations research?
Huh.
No, never heard of it. It's one of the handful of universities that has a department that's called operations research.
Okay.
And so that's how I learned about operations research.
So just from that advisor
Just
saying
that
you were
advisor,
said, okay, sure.
and I was like, yeah, okay. And I was good. I loved it. The classes, the courses were interesting, and that kind of started me off. And you get into your senior year, and it's like, okay, what am I going to do now? And I'd done an honors project with Dr. Mark Hartman, who was affiliated and professionally, Orsa Timms at the time would have been. He said, well, you should go to graduate school, but don't come here.
Okay.
You know, you'll find a good graduate school. And good graduate schools in engineering will give you money. So you should get a good ride somewhere. So I went to Northwestern. They actually gave me an opportunity to go there. That was when I actually learned about Informs.
Okay.
It was probably my 2nd or 3rd year as a graduate student.
For master's?
Master's PhD.
Okay.
The Department of Industrial Engineering and Management Science is what it is there. It's primarily PhD. I mean, you do get a master's along the way, but it's primarily PhD.
Okay.
A year or so into that, Orsa Timms was having its meeting in Chicago. With a little bit of faculty encouragement, several of the graduate students said, let's go check it out. I remember just being really impressed with kind of like, you go to the talks. I can't tell you anything about what I heard, what I saw, any of that. But you did get a sense of, wow, this is an interesting place. There was an energy and what I'll call a sense of community.
Yeah.
You know, you'd see people who clearly knew each other, welcoming old friends. You're in your little corner of the world doing the things that you find interesting, but they're kind of geeky.
Yeah.
I mean, have you ever asked your friends, hey, tell me about operations research, right? They kind of look at you with a glazed thing, just like fancy math or something like that. And that left a big impression on me. So that was kind of my first engagement with the community. And then we became Informs in 95, I think.
Right.
So
that does show how long you've been here, if you've been here since
it's been a
Orsa
while.
Timms. Yeah. So did you join as a student member then, back when it was Orsa Timms, after that first meeting you went to?
Yeah, I would have been a student member then after I finished my PhD and ended up in industry. Stayed connected.
Yeah. Great. Awesome. So you mentioned that you've worked in industry then your whole career, is that correct? You've never dabbled in any professor?
Well, actually, a little bit. So the story that people who know me know, but most people don't, is I had no interest in industry. Zero. None. But like some people do, I met my future wife when I was in graduate school. She joined Northwestern a couple of years after me, and she had no interest in academia. I did the interview circuit, and there were a couple of offers that were very good for me. The one that I was really excited about was the University of Arizona, right down the road here.
Yeah.
There was nothing else there for her.
Oh.
Right, and so we had a 2-body problem.
Yeah.
And she would, she was very gracious. She was like, no, that's fine. She can be a trailing spouse. I was like, I'm not going to live with that the rest of my life. So I actually started, with my advisor, we started a small company called Business Optimization Systems and Services. And so technically we had a startup there. And then I was fortunate enough that Northwestern actually gave me a research faculty role.
Oh, okay.
And so I did that for a while. She finished her PhD. She hired at General Motors. And I continued in the research faculty role for a while. And then I got tired of going back and forth every now and then. And so they had a role in research and development. They still had an industrial R&D organization. And it was wonderful. And so I applied for that. and transitioned into that. And it still, in a lot of ways, was like an academic environment at the beginning.
Mm-hmm.
The main shift was actually from me. It wasn't the company. It was like, okay, the kind of work that I'm doing, it's interesting, but it's not directly applied to GM. GM should probably buy the kinds of technologies I was working on.
Okay.
So, so I pivoted and loved it and never looked back. And I do remember coming to Inform's conferences and seeing all my colleagues who decided they would go academic. They were so stressed out.
Oh, no.
And I was so relaxed because I didn't have to worry about the tenure clock.
So you made the right decision for yourself.
For me, and for us. But I never would have predicted it.
Right.
I was really wholly interested in academia.
So you mentioned you start the startup with your advisor. Was that an Informs person as well?
It is, Sanjay Mehrotra. He's actually one of the organizers of this conference.
Yes, he is. Okay, awesome. Just wanted to see if name drop.
Yeah.
So having done both and being, a tenured member, what advice would you have for students in the field as they're nearing graduation and begin their career journey? Either, advice for choosing the path or just general advice?
It's so hard. You don't know what you don't know.
Yeah.
When we hire a lot of people, or we interview a lot of people who are new graduates. And I always tell them when you're looking for something, the two most important things in my experience are one, who your leader is, your direct boss, and two, the culture of the team. And unfortunately, you don't get a real good feel of that from any interview, unless you know people at the place. It's very hard to do that. So that's the generic kind of advice that I give people, because I think it holds true. I never try to sell anybody. You're looking, when you're interviewing for jobs, you're looking for a match. You really are not. There's such a desire to try to sell yourself and get the job. There's such a desire to compare things on dimensions that really won't matter long term to you, like the starting salary. Think about the community. Think about the colleagues, that you want to work with, and are they going to help you be better? Or, are you going to be the smartest person in the room? That's not always where you want to be. You're not going to have the same growth opportunities. Are you going to have people there who are going to support you and help you in that journey, and they have a mindset of partnership? Look for those kinds of things. Don't always chase the dollars. Don't always chase the name. This is a name, somebody recognizes this is where I want to go. Think about the longer term. It's hard to do because you're really excited you're coming out. When we do have people who join, and again, usually I'm hiring PhDs. I mean, even within the organization now. So the first 20 years of my career at GM were in the R&D organization, where I led the operations research activity for the company. We moved into what's a more operational team now. My boss is the Chief Data and Analytics Officer. And it's much more about speed and scale, but I still actually have a research function. And so when I'm hiring, there are a lot of PhDs. One of the pieces of advice that I give newer people is stay connected to your professional community, because it provides an anchor, right, that goes beyond. And it provides a place where you can grow that will serve you, not just in your career, which it can help you with your career, but it'll help you even if something changes and you want to explore other opportunities.
So join Informs.
So I encourage people not just to join, but to stay engaged and to be active.
Great. Thank you. So as a 25-year member, what's been your favorite Informs experience so far? You can pick one or two.
As an experience over time, it's really been personally participation in the roundtable. I've found that to be a community that's supported me and helped me grow, connecting with peers at other companies who are going through similar similar experiences. That's been good for me personally. It's kind of a longer term thread. From an event perspective, I will say it's the 2005 Palm Springs Informs Conference.
Okay.
And the reason is I'd started at GM, and one of the interesting things about industry is you can't publish your best work. You can't really talk about it because it's a competitive advantage, right? So, I used to tell people, I get to publish my B work. I mean, good journals, still things like that, but they're the things that aren't going to have billion-dollar implications. You'll use them and all that kind of stuff. And I learned about the Edelman Prize. I didn't know much about the Edelman Prize.
So that was an analytics conference.
And
the
this
spring
was
one?
this was a spring conference. Okay. They had only started it a few years before, actually, at the time. So it was still very different. It was a little different than it is now.
Yeah.
I had done some work that was just, a big impact. And I'd been building on the shoulders of people who had done some work before me. And so I said, let's do that. Went back and built a community. It could have been 2 people. It could have been me and one other person. But I kind of, who's done work around this at the company? And started finding more and more. We ended up with a team of like 10 people. And I was doing created all the slides. I wrote all the stuff. The scripts and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And we went there. At the time, they didn't have the gala.
Really?
That started like 2 years later. They didn't have the gala. And so what happened was you delivered this, and it was not a large conference in the way that it is relative to today's. Yeah. And so you did it, and you basically hung around.
Just
and you went to your rooms, and they would call you.
Yeah.
And it could be the middle of the night or whatever to tell you, if you're going to do the reprisal in the morning when they announce it, right?
Exciting.
But it was very memorable because not just was it a experience at Informs that stands out, and we won. We won that year, so that was really cool. That was fun too. And I mentioned you couldn't publish your best work. For me, that was like, okay, I'm in industry, best work. I feel like I'm kind of falling behind all my friends who went to Berkeley or wherever, and they're teaching, because I can't tell my story.
Yeah.
And we still couldn't publish the details.
Right.
But we could tell the story.
Right.
And winning that was actually something that felt really good to me, personally and professionally, because I'm the one who brought together that team. It was a lot of the work that I had done was what we were talking about in terms of the numbers, even though we didn't talk about those details. It just felt really good to be able to get some of the story out. And it was also great for me professionally at GM. Because in that journey of telling our story, I connected with people who had a longer history than I realized. It turned out that my vice president at the time, who has a degree in OR, a PhD in OR, I believe from Berkeley, had been applied for the Edelman 2 or 3 times in his career, and I think maybe even was a finalist a couple times. Well, this was the first time he won.
Yeah.
And he actually came out. I had included him in the team because he had an idea that started the work that preceded me. And he came out, and it was just one of those things that he won the Edelman.
Yeah.
And so I built a relationship there that actually then he knew me, and that helped my career in ways I would not have anticipated.
Right.
So you never know.
Yeah, that's true. That's awesome. Well, you sort of answered one of my questions. Other than the 2005 Edelman Award, you also are a finalist for the 2016 Wagner Prize. You are an Informs Fellow, and most recently bestowed this year's Kimball Medal. So congratulations on all of those. So you mentioned what the Edelman win meant to you professionally and personally. Have the other ones affected your personal or professional life in any way?
I think the Edelman was a big deal.
Yeah.
Because it was early in my career. It was very visible. We won. We also actually, I found that it's good to lift up other people on the team. And so I believe it was 2016 we applied for the Informs Prize.
Oh, okay.
And won the Informs Prize. I mean,
I don't have that on here.
You don't have it there because people don't win the Informs Prize. Companies win the Informs Prize.
So GM won.
So GM won the Informs Prize. But it was an opportunity where there was such a rich history of operations research excellence at General Motors that I could draw on stuff that was really before my time up to that point. And at that point, I had become the director of operations research, and so I had people who were part of that early journey. And it was just wonderful to be able to reflect not just what they've done, but even things that were done at that point in time that even now I'd say are still considered cutting edge when you think about vehicle technology.
Yeah, in 2016.
In 2016.
Right?
Yeah.
Awesome. Cool. So you're also a certified analytics professional, which is our CAP. Can you tell us why you decided to become a CAP and why you find certification to be important? I
happened to be joining the board as VP of practice around the time when CAP was getting launched. Mm-hmm. So Jack Levis and Ann Robinson, a crew of people, really did a lot of heavy lifting to get that. Mm-hmm. But it was just starting off. And at the point in time, it was like a paper and pencil. And it really was just so nascent. It's kind of like, what is this thing going to do? We saw a lot of potential. So part of that role was, well, how can we grow this? How can we deliver the best value? And what you realize is this was not for Informs members.
Right.
You're really targeting how do you bring in a larger community and how do you elevate the work that Informs does in that broader conversation of analytics. So we did some major things at the time. We moved it to electronic format. I think I actually took the first electronic test when we were validating that.
And
that's I passed. And I didn't have to study.
Okay.
That was the other thing I was going to see is how hard is this, right? If you've gone through a lot of the work and stayed engaged.
Yeah.
And I found that to be good. We also then realized that there were a lot of analytics programs starting at the time where they wanted an entry point, but you couldn't take the CAP directly without a certain level of experience. So we designed and created the associate CAP program. That was part of what we did in the tenure. I think it's important because, again, it does bring some level of the certification of, you have an understanding of some of these things that are important. I also think it's important because that broader community, as we move from, I'll say, a model-centric in a lot of ways, is operations research, I'll say, to a data-centric, right? And that pivot's been a long arc. It's not a new thing, right? But as we're doing that, a lot of the communities, computer science and IT, those communities actually value certifications a lot. And so having something that's out there that fits that need and can bring them in, I think is really powerful as we look to grow and further connect outside.
We've talked about CAP, we've talked about awards. Beyond those things, what would you say is the most useful Informs member benefit?
I don't think about member benefits in the same way that, when we look at benefits, it's the electronic access to journals and things like that. That's what comes to mind for me. The benefit of Informs, period, to me is connecting with people. That's all that it is. You find people who are doing innovative and novel things that are useful to you. Or even if they're not useful to you, it provokes ideas that you can integrate into, other things that you're doing. I mean, one of the interesting things we're a community that has a lot of academic. Relatively speaking, the practitioner population is a little smaller. I don't have the statistics you do. From a practitioner standpoint, one of the challenges is a lot of the literature actually assumes away the hard part of the problem. It's addressing something that you have to make some assumptions to get a nice theoretical result sometimes. And those assumptions, you can't just get rid of those. Or the scope is too narrow. You're solving one problem, but it's part of a much larger system. And that's not a fault in the sense that I think it's very hard if you're not in an environment where you have to solve the whole problem.
Right.
You do want to package it down to how do I do something. The trick for practitioner is how do I relax those assumptions that made it tractable or gave me a nice provability result in a certain dimension to something that really, that will have a practical value in this context. So I don't spend a lot of time I read the papers, I scan the papers. I don't want to make it sound like I, shut my eyes on that stuff. But it's the conversations that you have with people, sparking ideas when you have something interesting and go deeper. It's connecting, again, I mentioned the round table. It's wonderful as a community in part because it's not so large that you get lost. But you get to know people, you build relationships, you build trust over time so that people will share kind of we're not going to talk publicly about that. We have that problem too.
Excuse me.
And that's really valuable, that kind of practical knowledge, the willingness to be vulnerable and admit the things that aren't going so great, right? Because, people like to put forward their best face.
Yeah.
But you learn a lot more from failure than success.
Yes, that's true. Do you look to hire CAPs when you're hiring a GM?
So I was a big proponent for that.
Yeah.
And if you went back, I don't think we have an active posting right now, but the last time I put an active posting in there, we put CAP preferred in it. In reality, we haven't hired a CAP. Yeah.
We need more of them.
Yeah. And I did think about at one point making it available and just, anybody on the staff who wanted to do that. But I don't think that's actually a good use of the program in the same way. I think it is something that brings in, I do think the associate cap is a very attractive thing for someone who's just finishing, in particular because when I look at a lot of CVs and resumes right now, it's amazing to me, and I guess everybody has their own personal bar, but it feels like if someone took a class in this, they're an expert in it when it gets on their resume. And I do think that the certification that we have actually provides something that's a little deeper than that. So I'd value it when it's there, but I haven't found enough of a volume that it's a useful screening criteria.
If we were sitting here a year from now celebrating what a great year it's been for you, what would we be celebrating?
What motivates me, right? We all want to make a difference. I believe that in my heart. And what motivates me is kind of when I can do something that's a huge, visible, this is something that would, win the Edelman easily, right? Kind of a deal. So maybe that's it, right? We'd have something that it's not about the winning a prize, but something that actually was that big of a splash. I get excited by, no kidding, this was $1 billion impact we had.
Yeah.
And I've been fortunate in my career, not because of me, but because of the talented team that I have. It's just been amazing. I've never experienced a team with the depth of technical talent and collaboration that I have within my team at GM. And we've done that a few times. And there are a couple of things we're working on right now.
You're not allowed to talk about.
That I can't talk about. But I believe we've got something. If we can do it, it really is a multi-billion-dollar opportunity. And,
well, that's great.
And it's very exciting. It's going to be tough.
Yeah.
But if we can do it, and it's not just the analytics. I mean, the hard part's often the change management, right? It's not always. It's not just let's write down this model and solve it. Right. That's relatively easy, but it's messy and it's hard because it touches all these different parts of the business. So a year from now, if we crack that nut, I'll be on cloud 9.
Okay. Well, I'll follow up with you at next annual and see if that's happened for you. Do you have any other passions outside of this groundbreaking work you're doing?
I think I mentioned earlier I have 2 teenage boys.
Yes.
So they're junior and senior. So I will say that that my passion right now is my family. It's funny, when I had kids, I kept thinking, boy, they're going to be teenagers one day. Boy, they're going to be teenagers one day. I don't know. Something's going to happen because it's just gotten better and better.
Oh.
They never turned into the aliens who, everybody tells me they do.
Just go to their room and not talk to you.
Yeah. So my passion is them. Our older is a senior. They're 15 months apart. So he's looking at college right now, and that's very exciting to me. He has no idea what he wants, and I told him, "You're much better than I ever was." But I think there's a lot more pressure now than when I was applying for college. And my junior he's right behind him. So in 2 years we'll be empty nesters, which is kind of scary for me.
Right.
So in prep for that, my other passion is. So I've always loved to sing. Not many people know this.
Ooh.
Yeah, I sang a lot in college.
Okay. Were you in an a cappella group or a choir?
I was in an a cappella group, Chapel Hill. If there are any Chapel Hill people, the UNC Cliffhangers. We used to sell out there. Even got to sing the national anthem at a Bulls game with Michael Jordan.
Awesome.
When he was playing, he came down. It was with all my 12 other friends. But I've stopped that, other than I used to sing to my kids at night, because I just never have time. So my passion right now is I'm trying to learn guitar. Okay. So I can entertain myself, if nothing else. So that's
awesome. That's great. You know what? We'll end there. I think that's really good.
All right.
Thanks so much for talking.
It's great talking with you. Thank you for inviting me.
Of course.